This is David Chen. I'm here today with one of my favorite podcasters. Tansy Gardam is the host of the Going Rogue podcast. We are here to talk about the 2025 Oscar nominations. Tansy, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Apologies for my hay fever. I'm going to be a sniffly little kid.
All good. Well, your insights will shine through despite the allergic reaction to what's going on in the air, but hopefully not an allergic reaction to what's going on at the Oscars this year. I'm going to read here from Variety, which writes about the Oscars this year, that Emilia Perez, a musical about a drug kingpin who undergoes gender-affirming surgery, topped the 2025 Oscar nominations with 13 nods. It was closely followed behind by The Brutalist, a historical epic that examines the immigrant experience, and Wicked, the hit screen version of a long-running Broadway sensation, which both nabbed 10 nominations. Conclave, a thriller about the election of a new pope, and A Complete Unknown, a look at Bob Dylan's early freewheeling years, each had 8 nominations. All 5 of those films are up for Best Picture, the ceremony's top prize, alongside indies like Anora, Nickel Boys, and I'm Still Here, as well as the body horror film The Substance and Dune Part 2, one of the rare studio blockbusters to garner Oscar attention, end quote. So those are the kind of big winners of the nominations. Emilia Perez, The Brutalist, and Wicked, 13, 10, 10 nominations respectively. Tansy Gardam, curious your overall reactions to this set of nominations. What did you think?
I think it's very interesting. Just for context, 13 nominations for Emilia Perez. That is the same as Lord of the Rings Return of the King, Shape of Water, Curious Case of Benjamin Button. It is tied for the most Oscar nominations, full stop. Like, that's the most that there's ever been, and it's now on that podium.
Which is fascinating considering I literally partially talk about movies for a living. And I don't think I know somebody who both A, has seen Emilia Perez and B, liked it.
Well, I'm in one of those categories.
Yeah, so it's a huge sort of coup for this movie that, again, very few people I know actually seem to like. What were your thoughts on Emilia Perez, just out of curiosity?
So important context, I think, is that I'm obviously cisgender, but I have a fair few trans friends. So I actually went to a screening where it was me and 3 trans people in my row. And the general take was that it was a baby's first trans movie, but as a musical, it is better than Wicked. And that might be the most controversial take that I have.
Wow.
I think technically, as a musical, it is really interesting. It falls into a lot of traps that modern movie musicals do. But yeah, it's not bad on a film level. I'm shocked at how much acclaim it is getting. I don't think it's controversial to say I think that's partly a political call and partly very good marketing from Netflix. We were going to get into disappointments later, but it is one of my really kind of categories of the entire nominees.
Indeed. All right. So Emilia Perez, 13 nominations. That is huge number of nominations. Any other reactions or things that you thought the Academy got right this time around?
Absolutely. Flow with 2 nominations for Best Animated Film and Best International Feature. If you haven't seen it, I think it's out on Criterion in the States. It's in cinemas in a few countries. It's phenomenal. It is gorgeous. I absolutely adored it. It's 90 minutes of dialogue-less animation, a bunch of animals on the ark. And yeah, I just can't praise Flow enough. And I'm so glad that it's getting recognition because it is a tiny team. It's a micro budget. It's the sort of film that I think Emilia Perez is partly marketing itself as, this kind of game-changing, very small cut through of success. And I'm really glad that it's doing really well. Also, Chris Bowers getting nominated for Best Original Score. I think he should have that in the bag. I don't think he necessarily does, but he absolutely deserves it.
That's for The Wild Robot, which
Yes.
I agree, great score. Anything else, Tansy, you want to highlight?
I only caught A Real Pain this week, and I was really floored by it. I thought it was fantastic. I think it's a dark horse for Best Original Screenplay. I think the actual managing to write a character who is so believably engrossing and, you want to punch him and also hug him and also fix him and also tell him to fix himself with Kieran Culkin's character Benji in that. I think that Jesse Eisenberg has done a fantastic job on the screenplay for that, and I think he deserves praise for it.
Yeah, so that got nominated for Best Original Screenplay. Also, Kieran Culkin scored a nomination for Best Actor in a Supporting Role,
Absolutely
which
deserved.
I think is well deserved and very fascinating considering he has talked about how he almost didn't take that role. And
Mm.
I think producer Emma Stone needed to talk him into it
Yeah, and I
by
can
using
see you
some of the, yeah,
being resistant to that if you've played Roman Roy for
right.
a huge number of years and then there's sort of Roman Roy brackets more sympathetic.
It is a very Roman Roy-esque character.
Mm.
So, all right, I'll talk about a few things that I appreciated about the nominations. First of all, very nice. I mean, The Brutalist was my number one film of 2024, and so very nice to see it getting a bunch of nominations. I think it probably is the front runner, is my guess. Even though Amelia Perez got all these nominations, like if you ask me to bet money on who's going to win Best Picture, it's going to be The Brutalist most likely. Honora, very cool to
Mm.
see Honora make it all the way to the Oscar race. It scored nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress for Mikey Madsen, Yura Borisov, actor in a supporting role, very cool, as well as Best Original Screenplay and Editing. I think it's very worthy, and yeah, it's a relatively small film that it didn't break out in a big way at the box office or anything, but it's very critically beloved. I enjoyed the movie. I put it in my top 10 as well. So nice to see Honora get a lot of love there. Uh, there were some really surprising indie movies that got some love. I will say, I was a bit surprised to see The Substance get nominated for Best Picture. Not to say that it's undeserving, but the Academy doesn't usually recognize genre films in that category, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I think it
Um,
does if they're French. I think both it and Amelia Perez have that advantage of being French and being a bit like, oh, the French. Oh, they do genre over there. You can pronounce genre in a French accent.
Not sure I completely buy that correlation, but fair. I think there's something to the idea of Demi Moore, who, by the way, brought down the house with
Fantastic. Yeah.
her speech at the Golden Globes, but also obviously had a great performance in the movie. And I think the idea of Demi Moore being at the Oscars, giving an amazing speech is probably like a really big hook for nominating something like The Substance. Not again a movie that is deserving, just not something that I think typically is recognized. Also, Coralie Farja, who is the director of The Substance, got nominated for Best Director. That was cool to see as well. Was cool to see Coleman Domingo get nominated for Sing Sing, which is a
Mhm.
great performance and a great film. That movie also got nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay as well as Best Original Song. And yeah, like those are some of the highlights of things that were nominated that I was excited by. Uh, most of the movies that are in the Best Picture category are really good movies that I enjoyed, and so like to see them get nominated, I am delighted by overall.
Mm.
Tansy, let's talk about some of the things that disappointed us.
That's always the more interesting part.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the things that you felt like should have been nominated but did not get a nod?
Well, I'm going to start with one that did get a lot of nominations, but I thought that Honora really deserved a nomination for costume and hair and makeup. I think that
Mm,
we often don't nominate things that aren't period or big special effects when it comes to makeup and hair. But I think the actual, like, the craft of that and the very subtle storytelling that's done through costume and hair and makeup in Honora really deserved more attention. That said, I think costume should be a lock for Genty Yates and David Crossman for Gladiator 2, which I think is that film's only nomination this year.
yeah, yeah.
My
Other nominees in that category: A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Nosferatu, and Wicked. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's a pretty crowded field, but I
yeah.
think that Honora probably, and it is that thing where a lot of the technical categories, the things that definitely end up winning and often are nominated, you could replace best with most, where it is the most noticeable cinematography. It's the most noticeable sound, the most noticeable costume. And I think that Honora is something where the costume and hair is really subtle, so it's not as noticeable. My big snub of these lists is All We Imagine Is Light, which
Mm,
was a fantastic Indian film this year. It wasn't even submitted as India's pick for Best
right.
International Feature. The film that was chosen, La Pata Ladies, did not get nominated. I think All We Imagine Is Light would have absolutely been nominated, could have won. That's a lot of politics around the Film Federation in India. But yeah, I think the fact that it didn't even get a Best Original Screenplay is a real disappointment.
I had some disappointments that I wanted to share as well. The big one, Tansy, it's got to be Challengers.
Oh
Did
yeah,
not
best
receive,
not getting Best Original Score, insane.
not getting Best Original Score. A screenplay nomination, I think, would have been very warranted.
Even
Uh,
VFX, like there's some very
yeah,
impressive, very subtle. Again, it's probably the fact that it is not necessarily VFX you'd notice that has really let that down.
that's the one that really grinds my gears because it's
Mm.
like, wow, really? Like, Challengers was my number 2 film of 2024, and the idea that it's not nominated in any category,
But
pretty
that's
brutal.
really a
Pretty
time
brutal.
frame thing, isn't it? Like often films that are released earlier in the year just get forgotten by the time the nominations are coming out. Like I was surprised to see Inside Out 2 nominated for Best Animated Feature because I'd straight up forgotten that it had come out this year.
uh, Hard Truths, I would say. Have you heard of this film by any
I
chance?
have heard of it. I can't remember if it's had a release here. If it did, it was really tiny, but I've heard it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Very small film, but it has one of the best performances of the year by Marianne Jean Baptiste. And she was not nominated for actress or supporting actress. So very, very unfortunate, but that it was an incredible performance. It would have been nice to see it recognized. Gotta say, I Dune Part Two was nominated in multiple categories, including Best Picture, Best Cinematography, Production Design, and Sound, plus visual effects. But this to me really feels like uh, this should have been this year's Return of the King. This should have been this year's Titanic, in my opinion. A movie that has it all. Every component of the filmmaking is operating on all cylinders, and also it's a huge financial hit. Like, this is the time to bring together the popular movie and the critically acclaimed movies and people who love them both into one category and have it sweep the whole thing. And I'm bummed that that does not appear like it's going to happen.
But I feel like Wicked has been framed as the blockbuster financial success that's also going to win
Yeah.
a lot of Oscars. And again, it's that timing thing. I feel like I saw Dune Part 2 around this time last year. Like it has
Hmm.
been quite a while since it was released.
Yeah. And also, I think the Academy just generally doesn't like sci-fi very much.
Mm. And there is kind
There's
of the controversy about Hans Zimmer being ineligible for Best Original Score for Dune Part 2.
yeah, yeah, very, very odd situation there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, those were some of like my top line disappointments. Is like Dune, in my opinion, should have got more love, and there's a bunch of movies that didn't get any nominations, challengers specifically. I'd also say, just throwing out a few movies that were really good from last year, that I think should have gotten some nominations. I would say Ghostlight, a movie that very, very teensy tiny movie, had some great performances. Obviously, I think it's just too small scale for the Academy to recognize. But it was nice to, it's a great film. Um, uh, so yeah, those are just some of the things that come to mind in terms of disappointments.
Yeah, I saw
And
the TV Glow as well. I think
yeah,
that absolutely deserved a Best Original Screenplay. In terms of screenplays that are original and really cut through, that was, yeah, a big snub for me.
let's see. I would also say, best performance in a movie I didn't like very much. Denzel Washington was great in Gladiator 2.
I
Would have
feel like
been
the costume nomination is partly a nomination for Denzel for Gladiator 2, because he does a really great job of drawing attention to how good those costumes are. He's so dripped out and he wants you to know it. And I think that it could have gone unnoticed if it was a different performer in that role.
all right. So those are some of the things we liked. Those are some of the things we didn't like. Tansy, any other random observations about the Oscar nominations this year?
Look, I've already said my controversial take, which is that I don't think Wicked is especially good. And in
Hmm.
particular, I think the fact that it's been nominated for editing is absurd because it's a 2.5 hour film based on a 90-minute first half of a musical. And even just, I was rewatching the first because they put up one of the first sort of 10-minute slabs of the movie, and it's slow. It's so slow, and I would say it's wasting time. It's not building anticipation in a lot of that. It's just extra shots, extra time. And yeah, the fact that it's nominated for editing in particular, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Fair. Fair. Not a complaint I specifically have, but I understand. I respect it. I respect the complaint.
And my other big is the two best original song nominations for Amelia Perez. I think the best original song category itself is really weak this time around. Best original
Mm.
score is honestly pretty weak this time around, but song in particular, Mi Camino, the song that Selena Gomez sings in karaoke, is nominated for best original song.
Hmm.
That one felt like a parody sequence for me. I will give them El Mal does slap, absolutely slaps. Zoe Saldana does perform it really well, but the fact it's got two nominations, I think, is absurd.
A couple of other things to mention. Just like these are just like random things to shout out there. Cool to see The Seed of the Sacred Fig get
Mm-hmm.
nominated for Best International Film.
Best International
Um,
is the most interesting category, I think. There's a lot of incredibly strong films in there.
I agree. I mean, Amelia Perez is in there, but
Yeah, it's going to be
the other
sad when it wins.
the other movies are great. I gotta say, I'm Still Here
Mm-hmm.
is a great movie, and it's wonderful to see Fernando Torres get nominated as well. I think like that's gonna. It was a huge upset when she won the Golden Globes, and I think who knows? It's
Mm-hmm.
possible she'll win for that category. But I'm Still Here. Great movie. That is worth checking out. We got nominated for Best Actress and Best International Film. Um, what else? I want to mention No Other Land is a film that got nominated for Best Documentary Feature Film.
And that
That movie
still
does
hasn't had
yeah
distribution in the US, has it?
does not have distribution, and I would say it is an extraordinary piece of filmmaking. So it is worth noting that it was nominated for Best Documentary Film at the Oscars this year.
Yeah, and hopefully
Uh,
that will get it distributed far more widely.
Indeed, indeed. And wanted to throw a shout out to some of the nominations for The Apprentice.
Mm.
I have to say, so the Apprentice got nominations for both actor in a supporting, lead role for Sebastian Stan and actor in a supporting role Jeremy Strong. And I have to say, those were two really extraordinary performances, in my opinion. And what Sebastian Stan does in The Apprentice is really remarkable, in my opinion. It is not a Donald Trump impression. It somehow captures the essence of Donald Trump, but still he is able to make that quote unquote character his own. I think it's just a really, really remarkable. And also, Jeremy Strong was excellent in the movie as well. So it's cool that like every now and then a movie comes out of nowhere. It's like not nominated for anything. Like sometimes there'll be a movie that's only nominated for like one category, right?
Mm.
And clearly, the movie was very strong in that category. And in this case, it was nominated for best actor and best supporting actor. And I think it's very, very well deserved for The Apprentice. So wanted to give a shout out to that as well. Okay. Um, Only other thing, cool to see Nosferatu nominated for best costume, makeup, styling, as well as production design and cinematography.
Yeah, it's got quite a lot of technical
Yeah,
nominations,
yeah.
which, yeah, kind of goes against that genre argument. I think as well that is a little bit of an immediacy thing where Nosferatu
Hmm.
did have quite a recent release. It's one that people remember recently. The costumes are tending towards most rather than best. Although I will say the brown coat that Nicholas Hoult is wearing in one of his first scenes, I need the menswear guy to do a breakdown of where I can get one of those. Also,
Uh
the
huh.
the coat that the main kind of bad guy in Anora is wearing. It's a good brown coat season. I think we need to wrap up of where to get all of them.
No disagreement here. No disagreement here. All right. The other thing I'll just note as like we're reading through these is like Conclave is one of those movies that I think in another era would be a lock for all the awards, including Best Picture. And it just feels like it's not Conclave's year. Like I just
Yeah,
don't
and
feel like yeah,
it's
yeah.
odd how Amelia Perez is kind of splitting the vote there because, again, not to be like all of my trans friends, but all my trans friends love Conclave, did not care for Amelia Perez. So I feel
Right.
like everyone sort of agreed that's more interesting representation than Amelia
Absolutely,
Perez is
absolutely.
offering.
I mean, Conclave is one of the best movies of the year for sure, and it's just odd to consider that. I would be surprised if it wins anything, just
I
based on like
think
how people have been voting so
I
far.
think it should win for production design, but is Brutalist up for production design? Because that might be another case of being associated with the product, ending up getting the win because people are like, oh, Brutalist is about architecture. There was a lot of architecture in that movie.
It's the Brutalist, Conclave, Dune Part Two, Nosferatu, and Wicked. Those are all those are all great production design
Mm.
nominees, right? So it's like, but yeah, it's just interesting because like I just feel like when I was younger, Conclave would have been like that's the winner, that's the front runner, and it just doesn't feel like that this year,
Mm.
because I guess voters are interested in other things right now. So,
Mm.
all right. I think that's going to do it for us today. Let us know what you thought of the nominations. What were some things that you were really happy with? What are some things that you were disappointed didn't get nominated? Leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Fight with
What
me
people
about
think.
Wicked.
Absolutely. But anyway, that's going to bring us to the end of this conversation. Tansy Gardam is the host of the Going Rogue podcast, which you can find wherever podcasts are available. I would strongly recommend it. It's a great podcast. Tansy, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me.